President Biden issued an executive order earlier today that would shut down asylum requests at the U.S.-Mexico border once the daily number of migrant encounters reaches an average of 2,500 in a week's time. Now, this comes after 3.5 years of watching this administration and their border policies create a crisis at our southern border, which has not been limited to the border. It's spread all across the country. Now, we've heard repeatedly that the president did not have the authority to do this. So what led to this sudden about-face from a president who insisted he could not change his previous border policy? And will this executive order withstand a court challenge from the left? Join me now to discuss this and more is Congressman Josh Brecheen. He serves on the House Homeland Security Committee and the House Budget Committee. He represents the 2nd Congressional District of Oklahoma. Josh, welcome back to Washington Watch. Good to see you.
Thank you, Tony. Glad to be with you.
So after 3.5 years, and I know that you've sat in many committee oversight hearings where you've been told can't do anything, it's up to Congress to act. Why all of a sudden did the president find authority to act?
Well, I don't think it's that he's had a come to Jesus moment. I think that the smokescreen is with November elections in mind. And keep in mind that the way this executive order is designed, it's not going to be Trump-era level executive order. It's still going to allow crossings in the thousands. But, Tony, I'm not going to be surprised if this thing's not set up purposely with the ACLU in mind to bring a lawsuit to be struck down so he can say, gave it the old college try, but we just couldn't quite get there. And as a deflection, I think the only thing this president is really given a real college try for is student loan bailouts.
We're talking 10 million, at least, that have crossed the border during his tenure as president. This still would allow up to another million to come across.
And we're on track, 10 million total. And we're a country of 334 million Americans. And when you factor in a congressional seat is 750 to 800,000 to every 10 years with a census, one displacement of a rural area, which is typically what occurs, onto an urban area picking up a congressional seat, a loss of a rural area picked up by an urban area. Where are a lot of these people going? They're going where sanctuary city status exists. They're going to high population areas. So a recensus, a redrawing of areas, someone picks up in a head-to-head matchup, a urban area where a Democrat has a +5 to +30 advantage, no name against a no name, then look, I think that's where the real game is. It's about long-term power, and not just that, of course, but most of us know that their aim is ultimately to give them full citizenship status.
Well, and Congressman, this has been part of the debate over the census and who's counted in the census and how they're counted. And so when you have, as you just pointed out, illegal immigrants coming into the country, inflating the numbers in these congressional districts, shifting away from conservative representation to progressive liberal representation.
That's it. You said it much more succinctly than I did. That's it, Tony.
How do we stop this?
Well, we've got to be a people who, number one, we change by congressional law, and we have a president that signs it into law, what Chip Roy's introduced, where it says illegals would not be allowed to vote. We know that's happening. Then you have measures that would not allow them to be tied into a census. And so we have to have a law change to where common sense prevails. It's astounding. Even the concept of come into this country, have a child, and that child automatically becomes a citizen,
right.
is flagrant of what, our naturalization in Article 1, Section 8 is really to be about.
Yeah. This has a cascading effect. When you look at the border, it's not just the chaos at the border, but as you've pointed out, this has long-term implications for representation in Congress, and whether that is constitutional conservative representation or progressive liberal representation, which is their long-term aim. Josh, I want to switch topics very quickly. You recently sent a letter to the EPA demanding answers on the full negative effects of the abortion pill, mifepristone. And this is something that's often overlooked, because this is looked at in terms of the abortion issue, the sanctity of life issue, but there are implications for the environment that are being ignored. Talk about it.
Yeah, well, let me first of all say that the way that they studied mifepristone and its effect goes back to a 1996 case study where a minimal number of abortions were taking place utilizing mifepristone. That's what they build their formula around in terms of what they think is happening with drinking water, ultimately, wastewater that turns into drinking water. And look, we're approaching 65% threshold of all abortions in this country are now based on this drug, a two-part drug. Utilization once and then come back again. And look, the horrendous element of the unborn life being taken. All right, so we're not discounting that.
Right.
Senator Marco Rubio and I, though, wrote a letter because under a liberal administration, liberal regime, we want to point out you're using 1996 information when it was minimally used, and now 60% of all abortions are mifepristone based in this country. What do you think is going to happen when you put a chemical that's strong enough to kill an individual in its mother's womb into our wastewater, which turns ultimately recycled back into drinking water? And so that's what we're doing is we are trying to find a very wise way of highlighting what they don't want to talk about, what they don't want to study. And we want to get to ultimately the problem of utilizing this. And look, for Tony, for full transparency, I'm totally against mifepristone use, period.
Right.
Because I stand for life. But sometimes you've got to be able to point to other areas when you have people who are tone deaf to one argument and say, what about this argument?
But you're absolutely right, Josh. But this also shows the byproduct of disrespecting life and pursuing these instruments that kill, because it goes beyond, just like we were talking about the border, it goes beyond what you see with the immediately face-to-face. There are long-term consequences here. Very quickly, any answer yet back from the EPA?
No, but to compound on what you just said, great quote I heard one time, there's a high price to pay for low living. You're right.
Yes.
God sets things in place and he sets things in motion. Why is it all the results of adult stem cell research or where we're seeing gains and nothing on embryonic?
Yeah.
Because God's plan is perfect and his plan produces blessing.
All right, Josh, got to leave it there. Always great to talk with you. Thanks so much for joining us today.